All right, I want to talk about flexibility and mobility and what they mean, the difference between the two, and where you can kind of get the most bang for your buck depending on what kind of training effect you're looking for. Remember, train with intent. So when we talk about flexibility, we're talking specifically about end ranges, right? Like how far we can stretch a thing, all right? So flexibility doesn't necessarily mean that I can do anything with this ability other than just move my limb from here to wherever it needs to go, right? It's a range fan. It's this end range to this end range. That is what we mean when we say flexibility. The difference between flexibility and mobility is mobility means that I can load this range, right? So not only can I move all the way out here, but I can do so under load. So what does that mean practically? Using that motion I just did, that means like, let's say I'm a javelin thrower, right? I gotta be way back here and then boom, like really quickly apply a ton of force to those muscles and tissues when I'm in a stretch position. If I'm a baseball pitcher, right, I gotta be able to boom, like apply a ton of force when I'm in that extended range where typically everything is really compromised, okay? You can't do that unless you're mobile. If I'm playing capoeira or like I'm breaking or whatever, and I want to get into like a hollow back position like this, I got to be able to be inverted and load this position here. So if I can just move passively into this range, but I can't load it, that's useless to me practically, unless I'm just sitting there on the ground stretching. I see a lot of people that are, for whatever their intention, kind of indexing too far one way or the other way. So on the one end of the spectrum, you see a lot of people that either at the beginning of or on the tail end of their workout spending a ton of time just like stretch and stretch and stretch. I mean, here's the thing. Mobility is a thing that you have to continue to work on like any other physical capacity. It's use it or lose it. But it's one of those things where there's only so much you can work on it before you get nothing in return or diminishing returns, right? If you're spending 20, 30 minutes on the front end of, you're going to get on the elliptical, right? We're talking Gen Pop here. So you're going to get on the elliptical for like half an hour and do your thing. You don't need to spend half an hour doing all manner of stretches to get on the elliptical. That activity specifically doesn't require that high a degree of preparation. Generally, I'm making a general statement here. I'm not addressing individual nuance or whatever pre-existing pathologies that this person might have as opposed to that person. Do what you gotta to get ready. There are some days where I gotta do all kinds of things before I get on the bike. I gotta do some back extensions and I gotta do some glute bridges and I gotta do some, all kinds of stuff. Some days. Most days though, even at 46, because I just kind of regularly stay mobile and regularly kind of stay prepared for activity. Preparedness is kind of like the strength and conditioning version of readiness that the military likes to use. Like, we can deploy anywhere in 72 hours. Well, kind of likewise, the athlete, particularly the tactical athlete, so, soldiers, police, firefighters, law, I already said police. You should be able to just kind of like get up and go whenever without having to spend half an hour, 45 minutes doing all kinds of stretches and stuff like that. So that's kind of over-indexing on the stretching portion. Obviously, as an athlete, you want to have mobility, but that doesn't necessarily mean that flexibility is useless, because typically you have to first gain the ability to access that new range of motion before then you can load it. So the sequence of events is kind of like this. First, you access the end range through passive stretching. Then you gain the ability to move through that end range safely, unloaded. Then you gain the ability to add load to that end range and apply force while you're there safely. So that's kind of like the 3-tiered process of going from not being able to get into a position to then being mobile and being able to actively utilize that position for your sport or whatever kind of activity you're trying to do. Some people kind of get lost in the weeds and start spending, 45 minutes, an hour doing all this mobility stuff. And at the end of the day, why are we doing that? Flexibility, mobility, these are qualities that we want to have, but they're means to an end. They enable us to be able to have higher capacities and other things. When you are more mobile in the hips, it allows you to run faster because you have greater range of motion in your stride, first of all. And second of all, because you are less injury prone at those end ranges, your central nervous system doesn't down-regulate force output, so it enables you to go really hard because it's not worried about you pulling a hamstring or pulling your groin or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that people don't realize, that the true utility of mobility is it allows you to just do more work through a greater range of motion. And the physics of that can be staggering. And you look at punch mechanics, for instance. You look at a guy like in the UFC, like Alex Pereira or Francis Ngannou. These dudes, they're big and muscular, but part of the reason why they hit so hard is that extra couple millimeters of range of motion they have in their strike that other people don't have. That the physics of that extra couple millimeters times however many foot-pounds of force that they're generating with their muscle, times however many meters per second their fist is accelerating, all those multipliers, that like couple extra millimeters as a coefficient to those, increases at the end of the equation the total amount of force they can put in your face by a ton, right? And it's the same thing when you look at top sprinters or throwers or any kind of high level athlete, or even on the lower end, if we're getting away from like strength and speed, on the lower end, if you look at like triathletes or marathon runners, they're moving really fast, but for a long period of time. But the reason why Kipchoge can run at sub 5-minute miles for 26 miles is because at mile 23, he doesn't have to worry about pulling a hamstring mid-stride because he's very strong at those end ranges. He's not just endurant, he's also extremely mobile. So mobility lends itself to pretty much every day-to-day and athletic endeavor. But what I'm trying to get to in this video is do as much of it as you need. So stay mobile and stay in the fight.